What's up, AP Psych? Welcome back. We are moving on to our next unit on motivation, emotion, and stress, Unit 8. So this is a great topic. It teaches us a lot about in terms of why we do things, how we react to certain situations and why that happens, and also how we can deal with stress and use stress as a tool instead of as something that cripples us. So a lot of good topics coming up. Hope you enjoy it, and we're going to get started with a basic intro to the first topic, which is motivation. Let's jump right in. So motivation, it includes the influences that account for the initiation, direction, intensity, and persistence of behavior. So essentially it is why we do what we do, right? It's what drives us, what pulls us, what pushes us, all of those things that lead us to make decisions that we make. One massive example of motivation, right? Aaron Ralston was motivated to cut his arm off to free himself from a rock that had pinned him in a canyon. Right? If you think about how powerful motivation can be, this is a perfect example. He was motivated to live, had his arm pinned between his rock and the rock wall, and he used his multi-tool, this, to cut his arm off so he would survive. Right? So when we think about that, motivation is extremely powerful, especially when we consider what those influences that are motivating us are. Okay? And so a lot of times it's important to identify what is motivating us so we can understand ourselves better and push forward. So it's a basic intro to motivation. There are several different sources of motivation. First, you have biological factors. Okay? You talk about food, water, temperature, sleep, sex. All of those things are biological factors that push us or motivate us to do certain things and behave in certain ways. Then you also have those emotional factors, right? Our feelings, the way we're interacting with other people in terms of how they make us feel, how certain activities make us feel. If we're angry, we're sad, we're happy. We're going to behave in different ways, and it's going to motivate us differently. Then you have the cognitive factors, what we think and the way we think about certain things, how we view the different activities that we're doing or the tasks we're being asked to complete can motivate us differently as well. And then finally, you have social factors, things like peer pressure, acceptance of your friends, teacher motivation, parents, family, different social groups, and how their impacts media, technology, how the different society can push us and motivate us in different ways. So those are all different sources of motivation, and we'll get into how those sources impact the different theories of motivation as well. So our theories of motivation, there are 5 that we're going to discuss, and we'll go over each one individually, and they all have their own little take on what motivates people. So first up, we have instincts and evolutionary theories, right? So instinct is the innate, automatic disposition toward responding in a particular way when confronted with specific stimulus, right? This is evolutionary psychology, right? They would say that there are internal instincts, inborn things that we've evolved that lead us to perform certain behaviors or motivate us, right? For example, you have birds build nests, and salmon spawn, and they do these things perfectly the first time, right? And that's how we know it's an instinct or it's evolutionarily born, because it's perfect the first time they do it. That means it's ingrained in their genetic code, right? And that is an instinct or an evolutionary result. Now, the drawback here is that it's not as common with humans, okay, as it is with other species. Evolutionary instincts are huge in the animal kingdom, but with humans, we have some instincts, like the rooting reflex and the sucking reflex when you're born in order to, find food and survive. But these instincts kind of dissipate over the first few months. And humans are much more, they're much bigger learners in terms of observational learning and cognitive learning, right? And that's why most psychologists believe that human behavior is directed by physiological and psychological forces rather than evolutionary instinctual forces, because we learn over time the behaviors and the motivations that we use. Okay? It's not necessarily as instinctual as it is for different animals. So number 2, we have the drive reduction theory. And this would state that motivation arises from imbalances in homeostasis. So going back to review that term briefly, homeostasis, that balance that we have, that physiological balance that we're always trying to maintain and achieve so that our body feels like it is a normal state, a resting state. When there's an imbalance created by a need, the brain responds by creating a drive. Okay, so let's think about an example here. There's a need created in your body. Let's say your blood sugar drops because you haven't had enough intake of food, right? So your blood sugar drops, boom, there's a need. We need to raise that. So what does your body create? It creates a drive of hunger, right? Then that prompts you, the organism, to take an action to satisfy or reduce that drive, which is eating. Okay, you can think of the same thing with thirst. You're dehydrated, all of a sudden your mouth is dry, you're trying to figure out where to go. What you need to do, you need to find water. So you find that's drive, you get water, something to drink, you take that action to satisfy that drive or that need. That's drive reduction. Something is pushing you to act. Okay? On the flip side, you have incentive theory. Okay, we just talked about drive reduction, where our needs or drives push us into action. Incentive, you want to think more as something is pulling you towards a specific action or motivating you by bringing you along, right? So it's a positive or negative stimuli that pulls us in one way or another to satisfy our needs or wants. Okay? The value of an incentive is influenced by both biological and cognitive factors. Okay? So it can be a biological incentive, such as incentives can be food, drink, things like that, sex, while as it can also be a cognitive factor, such as money, championships, good grades. Okay? So these are the things that pull us along. They're not pushing us. We don't necessarily have an internal need or drive that says you need to go do this right now so you can get back to homeostasis. This is a look at this thing you could receive if you do this action. And that's the incentive part of it. Okay. Our third is optimum arousal. So human motivation, we aim not to eliminate arousal, but to seek optimum levels of arousal. So when we talk about arousal, let's clarify that. In psychology, when we say arousal, we mean like engagement. Your brain is a certain level of action or preoccupation. And it's not necessarily when we think of like arousal sexually or anything like that. It's like your brain is aroused, it's active. Okay. So what they found with optimum arousal is that humans perform best when arousal is moderate. Okay, so think about that. We as people, we want to be engaged, right? We don't want to be bored. When you're sitting around at home and you're like, man, I'm so bored, I want to do something, right? You want to be engaged, you want to be aroused, but you don't want to be overly engaged or stressed, right? When you get too much arousal, you become stressed out and your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. And now you're in a stress response. And we know that stress response over too long of time period can be unhealthy, right? So we want to find that moderate level of arousal. And that's this Yerkes-Dodson law, where they found Yerkes and Dodson did some studies, and they found that people who hit that moderate level, that strong engagement level, perform best on different tasks. Okay. So if you ever heard the phrase, if you ever competed in any competitions, whether it's sports, art, music, any type of intellectual competitions, quiz bowls, things like that, if you get too nervous, you perform poorly, right? But if you're not nervous at all, you don't have any of those butterflies in your stomach, you usually don't have your best performance either, right? So they say, if you're not a little bit nervous, you don't care about it. Okay, so that moderate level of arousal is what you're looking for. And generally, we try to increase arousal when it's too low or decrease when it's too high. Another thing to keep in mind here is the optimum level is different for every person, right? Some people, their optimum level of arousal is chilling at home, watching Netflix, hanging out, right? But others, they need to go do something. They need to be actively engaged. So another part that shows this, young monkeys and children, when they're observed, naturalistic observations in a room, there's an absence of a need-based drive. So nothing is pushing them to perform an action, and there's no incentives in that room. They will still explore it because they don't want to be bored. They're looking for engagement in certain ways, right? So we know that there's another aspect to this, and that's optimum arousal theory. And part of that being the Yerkes-Dodson law. Moderate arousal is perfect. So our last one is Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. And this is a humanistic theory that states that we need to move through these levels or these needs in order to reach self-actualization. And this is what we're all striving for. We all want to be our best selves, right? That's a very humanistic idea based of psychology. And we're all striving to get to this point. But Maslow would tell you the lower needs must be met first, right? We need to have our biological and physiological needs met first. We need air, food, drink, shelter, warmth, sex, sleep. We need these biological things to be met. So then we can move up the ladder to safety needs, where we can feel protected and secure and order and law. And eventually that means if we have these two, we can become part of social groups and start feeling belongingness and love, family affection, relationships, a good work group, things like that will allow you to achieve your status, responsibility, reputation, and worry about those things. And once you've accomplished all these, you could potentially reach self-actualization, where you feel fulfilled with what you've done. You feel like you've had a great amount of personal growth and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and making an impact on the world, right? So what Maslow found was these needs, they don't have to be fulfilled 100% to move up to the next level. But in his research, he estimated that only about 10% of people reach level 5 and they feel personally fulfilled in what they're doing, which is kind of sad. You're hoping more people can find out what they want to do and feel a sense of growth and fulfillment in that activity. Okay. Now, this theory is a bit arbitrary. The order's not universally fixed. There's always going to be expectations, people jumping around to different levels. But generally, this was Maslow's theory of how we move through the different levels. Okay. So those theories of motivation, those 5 theories, those are big ones. Go back through, think about them, look over them, and we'll do some activities in class as well to help make them stick. And this is our intro, and we'll break things down from here. Have a good one.